Sophia had this habit of rearranging furniture like she was trying to unlock some secret passage to a better marriage. Every other weekend, without fail, the living room would look like a freshman dorm before inspection. The couch would be half turned toward the window for light flow, chairs angled with military precision toward corners no one ever sat in, and that poor coffee table, bless its legs, shuffled around so much it started to resemble a refugee from a furniture war. Now, if you're wondering what this has to do with betrayal, keep your seatbelt buckled. We're just pulling out of the driveway. It all started when Sophia decided to convert our spare room, the one that had housed everything from unopened wedding gifts to the elliptical she used twice in 2019, into a creative space. That's what she called it. A place for her to write, paint, meditate, or as it turned out, unravel our marriage with finesse. I didn't argue. I figured if converting that room meant fewer rearranged chairs, I'd get on board and even hang up a couple of those wire and wood inspirational signs she loved so much. You know the ones. Live, laugh, love, or let the sky be your limit. Which, frankly, didn't mean much unless you were an astronaut. I helped her move the boxes, dusted off the yoga mat, and even plugged in the lava lamp she found at a thrift store and swore was vintage. It wasn't. It was from Target, and I'm pretty sure it still had the clearance sticker on the bottom. After the transformation, Sophia spent a lot of time in there. Doors shut, hours at a time. I figured she was journaling, painting sunsets with motivational quotes in loopy font, or doing whatever people do when they've outgrown the phase of watching every true crime documentary and moved into their healing era. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen trying to microwave leftovers without turning them into volcanic ash. Some days I'd hear music from the room. Folksy stuff, sometimes ambient noise, sometimes what I could have sworn was French jazz. I never asked questions. Every marriage needs some oxygen. At least that's what my barber told me once when his third wife took up archery and started locking the bedroom door. It was a Thursday that finally peeled the wallpaper off our picture-perfect life. Not a dramatic Thursday, mind you. Not stormy, not rainy, not even ominously gray. Just irritatingly pleasant. Blue sky, birds chirping somewhere out of view. A kind of day that makes you feel guilty for not smiling. Sophia left early that morning for ceramics. Yes, ceramics. She'd taken it up as a new hobby in what I assumed was a quest to connect with some part of herself that had been buried under years of emails and Amazon Prime returns. I didn't ask questions. Again, oxygen. Now here's where the fun begins. I got an email from Sophia Art Studio. I assumed it was junk or some Etsy-adjacent newsletter promoting locally made spoon rests. But curiosity's a clever little pest, and I clicked. It wasn't a newsletter. It was a confirmation. For a gallery booking. Gerald, it said, my name, plain and proud like a lawn gnome. Thank you for your support of Sophia's upcoming show. Private preview attached. Please confirm attendance. Sophia? Art show? Since when did she go from finger-painting moons to hosting full-blown gallery exhibits? I opened the preview. 10 high-resolution photographs of her latest mixed-media series titled Reclaiming Passion. Now listen, I don't pretend to understand art. I once thought an abstract painting in our dentist's office was just drywall damage. But I know people, and I know posture. And in every one of those 10 pieces, there was a man. The same man. Not posing like a model. No, he was sprawled, wrapped, entwined with splashes of fabric and colors that screamed things like yearning and shirtless vulnerability. I squinted, clicked zoom. The man had a birthmark on his neck. A faint crescent, like a smudge. Looked familiar. A little too familiar. Enter Charles. Charles with the tight slacks and the conversational scarf. Charles from the community garden board who once told me I should try drinking kombucha instead of coffee because the gut is the throne of emotion. Charles who said bro with soft RS. That Charles. Turns out, he'd been helping Sophia curate emotional landscapes through figurative presence. Her words, not mine. And suddenly, it all clicked like the world's most insulting jigsaw puzzle. The locked door. The new lavender-scented candles, which I wasn't supposed to notice, because apparently men are born with broken noses. The increased ceramic studio hours. It wasn't about clay. Unless clay is a metaphor for Charles and his flexible yoga limbs. Now, I wasn't mad. I was intrigued. I mean, look, if you're going to torch your marriage, at least do it with a flair for the dramatic. A gallery showing? That's not infidelity. That's theater. Naturally, I RSVP'd to the preview. I showed up in slacks I ironed myself, only 3 new creases, and a shirt I hadn't worn since our nephew's graduation. The gallery was in a refurbished bank, of course, because nothing says artistic soul like exposed brick and ironic vault doors. Sophia didn't see me at first. She was standing near a sculpture that looked like it was made from melted lamps and maybe one confused mannequin. Charles stood beside her, nodding like a guy who once took a philosophy class and never got over it. I didn't interrupt. I took my time, admired the work. Each piece was a little more obvious than the last. In one, Charles was lying on a rug made of shredded poems. In another, he was seated at a table eating what appeared to be fruit, grapes, maybe, while Sophia painted his silhouette in the background. It was all very, what if Michelangelo painted thirst traps? Then there was the final piece. Unspoken truth. It featured a man, again, Charles, because of course, half-dressed, hands stretched out to a blurred female figure stepping into what appeared to be my garage. Yep, my garage door. The one I painted myself last spring while Sophia told me I should have hired someone with a steadier hand. That's when she noticed me. "Oh, Gerald," she said, eyes wide like she hadn't expected the man she married to attend the public display of his own redundancy. "Sophia," I said, hands in pockets. "I didn't realize your creative journey included our garage. I feel honored." She stammered, eyes flitting between me and Charles, who now looked like he wanted to blend into the sculpture behind him, a feat that would have required him to fold like a suitcase. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I simply clapped. Slow, deliberate. "Quite the narrative arc," I said. "A little obvious with the symbolism, but you've got a real knack for lighting." Charles's cheekbones have never looked more illuminated. She opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "Save it for the critics," I said, already walking toward the door. "But hey, if you ever do a sequel, might I suggest you call it Still Life with Lies?" That was the day the furniture stopped moving. The first person I told about the artistic betrayal, as I had mentally branded it, was my cousin Leonard. Now, Leonard is the kind of guy who wears khakis with pleats because he thinks it gives him strategic airflow, and he's never once passed up the opportunity to use a phrase like, "well, technically," in casual conversation. In short, he was the perfect audience. We were standing in line at a DMV because nothing screams introspection like a 2-hour wait to update your address. I figured if I was going to talk about my wife's romantic performance art featuring the community garden's most flexible board member, I might as well do it surrounded by irritated strangers holding numbered tickets. "So she made Charles into a muse?" Leonard asked, squinting like the concept personally offended him. "Not just a muse," I said. "He's practically a franchise. He's in more frames than our wedding photos." Leonard laughed, then choked on a breath mint he'd been crunching like gravel. The woman in front of us turned around and gave us a look usually reserved for public urinators. I smiled politely and went back to the story. To be honest, it wasn't even the art show that stung. That was just the finale. It was everything that came after. Or didn't come, rather. Sophia never mentioned it. Not the gallery. Not the Charles pieces. Not the fact that I had RSVP'd and stood directly in front of a canvas titled Man Interrupted. She came home late that night and told me she had a very productive evening, which, if we're being fair, might have been true depending on how one measures productivity. I waited a week. Not out of confusion, mind you. I just wanted to see how deep her commitment to pretending could go. It went deep. Mariana trenched deep. She acted like the gallery didn't happen. Like I didn't see Charles with his shirt half on and his dignity fully off, wrapped in interpretive lighting and surrounded by commentary cards with lines like "a study in tactile grief." So I did what any man in my position would do. I printed the gallery flyer, put it in a frame, and hung it in the hallway. She passed it 4 times before finally saying, "What's this?" "Oh," I replied, not looking up from the paper. "Just a little something I picked up at a show last week. Thought you might know the artist." She looked at the frame, then at me, then made a noise like someone trying to sneeze without alerting the group. And just like that, silence resumed its reign. It was astonishing, really, her ability to carry on as if the walls weren't slowly closing in. If delusion was a sport, Sophia would have had medals and sponsorships. Now, let's rewind a little because there's one important detail I left out. Right before the show, she had installed a lock on her creative room. Just a simple lock. Nothing fancy. The kind of thing you'd use to keep a curious toddler out of a closet full of cleaning supplies. I had assumed it was to protect her art. But after the show, I started to wonder if maybe it was protecting something else. I wasn't in the habit of snooping, mainly because I had a career, dignity, and a baseline level of laziness. But curiosity has a tough way of making a man productive. And so, one Saturday morning, while she was out at what she referred to as a chakra alignment circle, which, to this day, I'm not convinced is a real thing, I got to work. Now, here's where things take a turn. I didn't break in. I didn't need to. Turns out, Sophia left the key taped under the potted plant outside the door. A potted plant, mind you, that she routinely forgot to water, which tells you something about both her attention to detail and her plant murder rate. I opened the door expecting to find paintbrushes, maybe a half-finished sculpture of Charles's profile with wistful shading. What I found was worse. There were papers, dozens of them, some typed, some handwritten, all very organized, clipped in neat little stacks, and each one was labeled with a name, not just Charles. Oh no, Sophia wasn't a one-man operation. This was an anthology. There was Jason, Dan, Marcus, not that Marcus, thankfully, but still unfortunate. Even someone named Ken W. Tennis. In parentheses, like a flavor. These weren't love letters. They weren't even particularly romantic. They were logs, observations, notes, like she was conducting a study. One read, Jason talks too much about his trip to Peru. Doesn't listen. Good bone structure though. Might use again for line work. Another, Ken W. Tennis, has perfect posture but lacks presence. Useful for static poses, not motion. And then the Charles files. Plural. Now I'm not a confrontational man. I once thanked a waiter after he spilled tomato soup on my lap. But reading those pages, I felt something entirely new. Not rage. Not even betrayal. Amusement. Because here it was. Sophia wasn't just unfaithful, she was running a workshop. A human library. And Charles? He was just the current bestseller. I took the folder labeled Charles, Gallery Material, and made a copy at Staples. The guy behind the counter didn't even blink. Guess they've seen worse. When she came home, I was sitting in the living room with the copy on the coffee table. I didn't say anything, just kept flipping through a magazine about backyard pergolas, which I had no intention of building. She noticed it almost immediately. What's this? She asked. I turned the page. Oh, that? Just some reading I found in your studio. I didn't know you were keeping a database. Very organized. Sophia didn't say anything for a moment. Then she sat down and crossed her legs like this was a business meeting. I didn't think you'd understand, she finally said. Oh, you're absolutely right, I replied. Because when I think about our marriage, I certainly don't expect to find my wife categorizing men like she's drafting a fantasy league. It's not like that, she said. No, of course not. It's art. Field research. For the greater good. Who am I to interrupt science? She tried to explain. Something about exploring identity through human form and shifting narratives of personal agency. I nodded like I was listening, but mentally I was somewhere else, building a little scoreboard titled Marriage. Sophia, 1, Gerald, observing from the bleachers. We didn't argue. There were no threats, no declarations, just that long, awkward silence that settles in when two people realize they've both read the same book and come away with very different conclusions. I gathered the pages, put them in a manila envelope, and handed it to her. You might want these for your next show, I said, or at least for the acknowledgments page. Then I went to bed, in the guest room, which, up until that point, had mostly been a storage space for old vacuum parts and a broken lamp. But it felt cleaner somehow, like it hadn't been used to catalog emotions under paper clips. By the time morning came, Sophia had labeled 3 new folders. Not for men, though, for herself. I didn't look inside. Some mysteries are better left untouched. Sophia had a talent for taking normal things and making them exhausting. For example, she once turned the act of buying a stapler into a 4-week ordeal involving online forums, consumer reviews, a spreadsheet, and a phone interview with someone named Trent from an office supply subreddit. So, when it came time to talk, I knew I had to prepare like I was attending a congressional hearing with someone who considered herself both the speaker and the stenographer. The moment presented itself on a Sunday evening. She was at the dining room table arranging her paintbrushes by bristle width, because apparently they needed to breathe. I was sitting across from her, pretending to read a home insurance brochure with enthusiasm, which was a lie so large it should have required its own zip code. I slid the envelope across the table toward her, the same one from the previous week. She didn't look up, just continued to gently pat her flat brushes like they were nervous pets. "You're still carrying that around?" she said. "I figured you would have at least burned it in a symbolic act of self-righteousness." "I tried," I said. "Turns out Staples copies are fireproof and deeply unsatisfying to light on fire." She sighed and finally looked at me. The air had that stale, humid texture only couples in denial can generate. "So, Gerald," she said, like she was hosting a podcast, "what is it you want to understand? Let's start simple. Why Charles? Out of all the potential muses in town, you picked the guy who says namaste before checking his mailbox?" She smiled faintly. "Because he listens." "To who?" "His Spotify suggestions." She didn't laugh. I wasn't trying to be funny. That was just a bonus. "I didn't pick Charles," she said, brushing a non-existent speck off her jeans. "He just fit the frame." "What does that mean?" "It means I needed someone consistent, expressive, and uninhibited." "So, a golden retriever with a subscription to GQ?" "Gerald, no, really. Help me here. Because I'm trying to figure out if this is about emotional neglect, artistic ambition, or just sheer boredom. Was I not stimulating enough? Should I have walked around shirtless, holding figs?" "It wasn't about you," she said. "Well, you've certainly made it about not me in a very organized way." She stared at the envelope like it was a dead bird I had left on the table out of spite. "Do you know what it's like," she said, "to feel like your life is just a series of neutral tones?" "You mean like being married to someone who organizes people by adjective and lighting preference?" "People change. I noticed. You changed Charles out of his shirt in at least 4 different lighting setups." She finally leaned back, arms crossed, that expression she reserved for condescending yoga instructors who misquoted Rumi. "You're not angry." "I'm not," I admitted. "Because being angry would require this to feel surprising. And after finding your folder system, I started to feel more like a category than a casualty." "You could have asked me." "Oh, I was going to. But every time I walked into your studio, you acted like I'd stepped into a sterile lab mid-experiment." "I didn't cheat on you." I tilted my head. "Define it then. Because I'm pretty sure Charles doesn't think he was just posing. You weren't exactly sketching his soul. I never slept with him. That's not the defense you think it is. You're being dramatic. Sophia, you made a series of interpretive art pieces featuring a man you cataloged with clinical precision while being married to someone you couldn't be bothered to emotionally text back. Forgive me for not seeing nuance." She stood up. "The universal sign for this conversation is now emotionally inconvenient." "I didn't think it would matter." "You didn't think at all." Silence. She sat back down. "You used to want more," she said. "You talked about writing again. You had ideas. Then you just stopped. You came home, opened your laptop, watched videos about car maintenance, and called it a night. You used to have something to say." I blinked. "I didn't realize my inability to write a screenplay about a haunted dentist meant you were cleared to start an unofficial modeling agency in our spare room." "That's not what I said." "That's exactly what you said, but with more syllables. You stopped participating in us. And your answer to that was starting auditions for someone who looked good in profile." She paused. "I didn't know what else to do. There's a brilliant concept. Talking. Sharing. Using your actual mouth to form sentences. I read about it once." Her arms dropped. "I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to feel responsible. Different thing." We sat in silence for a while. "Not the kind that heals. The kind that measures distance." "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "But I did need something to come back to life. So you built it with someone else." "I built it for me. And furnished it with other people's attention." "That's unfair." "No. It's accurate. Just inconvenient." Her eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you want now?" "That's the first honest question you've asked. I want out of the art exhibit. I want to stop being a subject in a series you didn't bother to curate with dignity." "And then what?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll take up sculpture. Start shaping busts of my disappointment. Title the first one Creative Space." "Gerald." "No. You've had the floor. I've listened to the monologue. Here's the closer. I don't need to understand all of it. I just need to not be a chapter in someone else's thesis on emotional voids and charcoal techniques." She looked away. I stood up. "Finally. I'll be staying at the town rental. The one next to the laundromat. Don't worry. I'll leave the key under the plant. Tradition." I took my bag from the hallway, already packed 2 nights ago, because I'm many things, but not spontaneous, and walked to the door. Sophia didn't say anything. Because really, what was left to say? She had her muses. I just didn't want to be one of them anymore. I didn't leave with a dramatic suitcase. No doors slammed, no shouting match, no neighbor peeking through blinds to whisper, "I told you they wouldn't last." I just grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed 3 days earlier, one change of clothes, a laptop, and a folder labeled Miscellaneous Sanity, which was really just blank printer paper, and walked out. No note. No final glance at the living room that had seen more tension than furniture use. I even left the trash where it was, which felt like the most honest goodbye I could manage. The place I landed wasn't glamorous. A short-term rental over a bakery, which meant the hallway always smelled vaguely like yeast and regret. The walls were thin, the mattress was suspiciously loud, and the ceiling had a patch shaped like Australia that occasionally flaked onto my pillow. But it was mine, temporarily, which is exactly how I now viewed commitment. I didn't tell anyone at first. Leonard found out only because he came over for our weekly game night and ended up playing checkers against Sophia, who beat him 3 times and served him herbal tea with a smile that said, "Gerald's not here, and we're pretending this is fine." He texted me afterward. "Did you die or just move out of your own life?" "Bit of both," I replied. The thing about revenge, real, satisfying, adult-grade revenge, is that it doesn't need drama. It just needs precision. And, ideally, the help of someone who owes you a favor and has poor impulse control. Enter Henry. Henry is my coworker. He handles internal audits and collects antique calculators, which makes him sound dull, but he has one extraordinary quality. He cannot resist getting involved in things that don't concern him. He once organized a building-wide intervention because someone was microwaving fish. He's nosy with a purpose. And for once, I had a purpose that needed his kind of nosy. The plan wasn't to hurt Sophia. It was to return the favor, emotionally, tastefully, and with the flair of someone who once spent 3 hours organizing her spice rack alphabetically and then decided cumin was too aggressive to keep in the house. In other words, I had to be subtle. So I started where all chaos begins, online. Sophia had recently built a profile for her art under the name S. Elaine. Apparently, using your middle name is mandatory when pretending you discovered yourself through broken ceramic tiles and an above-average grasp of mood lighting. She was gathering traction too, local art features, a few fawning comments from strangers who found depth in her photo series titled Man as Silence. I created a profile under the name Thatcher Monroe. Sounds pretentious, doesn't it? That was intentional. Thatcher Monroe was a gallerist from the coast, with an eye for subversive contemporary expressions and a background in emotional form studies. Which, if you're wondering, is not a real thing. But neither was most of Sophia's philosophy, so it felt even. Thatcher messaged her about her work. He praised her framing choices, her brave use of washed-out tones, and the tension between capture and abandon in her portrayal of Charles, who in one piece looked like he'd just discovered indoor plumbing. Sophia replied within 15 minutes. Courteous, modest, and hungry for validation, disguised as humility. Thatcher built rapport. Over 2 weeks, he became a fan, then a potential buyer, then a curious mentor. By week 3, he proposed including her work in an exclusive private portfolio viewing for a group of emerging artists in Seattle. No actual gallery, of course. Just a link to an extremely professional-looking site I built using a free template and stock photos of buildings that don't exist. Sophia agreed. She sent in an artist's statement, which was 4 paragraphs long and didn't include a single concrete fact. It read like someone tried to summarize a dream they once had about wind. Thatcher was impressed. Genuinely. I mean, I had no idea she could pack that much nothing into 300 words. The moment of payoff was simple. Thatcher asked for a portfolio, a collection of work that reflected her current process. She sent 15 high-res images. All new. None with Charles. Apparently, she'd started using mirrors and self-timers. A whole new phase. A shift. A reinvention. The email ended with, "I feel like I'm finally making something real." That's when I hit forward. The recipient list was small. Her mother, who still called me sweetheart, the local magazine editor who'd recently published her artist spotlight, and Charles. Yes, Charles. Now, I wasn't interested in shaming anyone. But Sophia's new work didn't include Charles, and I suspected Charles didn't know he'd been archived. I added one sentence to the forwarded message. Sophia's latest work, quite the departure from her earlier pieces. Thought you might find the evolution interesting. No accusations, no explanations, just a quiet reminder that the camera moves on quickly. Charles responded within hours. A polite but unmistakably irritated email to Sophia. Would have been nice to know I was replaced with a tripod. Her mom didn't reply. She called. Gerald, she said, what's going on? Art, I said. Apparently, it's a collaborative medium now. The magazine editor replied too. Not to me, but to Sophia, publicly, in a follow-up post on her feature. He added a note praising her growth and willingness to challenge the foundation of previous works, which, in gallery speak, is roughly the equivalent of saying, we see what you did, and we're trying to pretend it's development. Sophia showed up at my rental 4 days later. Not with anger, with curiosity. You're the gallery guy, aren't you? No, I said. Thatcher Monroe is the gallery guy. I'm just the man who used to pay for your art supplies. She sat down, uninvited, on the scratchy blue couch the rental came with. You made a point, she said. No, I said. I gave you a platform. You supplied the irony. She didn't defend herself, just stared out the window at nothing. You could have just left, she finally said. I did. But then I remembered how much you like feedback. We didn't talk much after that. She left quietly, probably off to rename her next exhibit, Reflection in Crisis. I didn't feel victorious. That would require her losing something I still wanted. I just felt done. There's a specific kind of quiet that follows a separation, one that isn't peaceful or somber or even painful, really. It's just irritating. That kind of silence where every creak in the ceiling sounds personal, like the drywall is judging you. That's what I lived in for the first week after leaving. The laundromat next door didn't help. Its nighttime cycles sounded like a haunted blender trying to pass a kidney stone. But it reminded me I was somewhere else. That was the whole point, after all. To be elsewhere. To not be part of whatever Sophia was curating in that house anymore. Sophia didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't suddenly show up at the rental with an emotional slideshow and a voice shaking from post-creative clarity. She did nothing, which, ironically, was more shocking than if she'd dropped off a stack of apology postcards printed on recycled paper and dipped in sandalwood oil. So I waited. Not because I wanted reconciliation. I just wanted closure, but not the glossy, movie kind. Just a sentence. A full stop. A period at the end of what had become a very confusing run-on paragraph. She reached out on the 9th day. A text. Simple. Clinical. When can we talk? No emojis. Which felt intentional. Sophia used emojis sparingly, but when she did, she went big, bouquet, shooting star, spiral galaxy. This time, nothing. Just the words, like she was scheduling a dental cleaning. I replied, Thursday. 6, I'll come by. I chose Thursday because I had nothing else to do. And 6 because I figured we'd both be too tired to pretend. When I walked back into the house, it was exactly as I left it, which meant it had probably been carefully restaged to look that way. Sophia didn't greet me with any fake warmth. She didn't pour tea or offer a carefully curated playlist in the background. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop closed and a notepad beside it, because she never did anything without a plan be scribbled somewhere. I sat across from her like it was a negotiation and we were haggling over who got custody of the heir. She didn't look like someone who was devastated. She looked like someone who'd finally remembered she had an overdue bill to pay and wasn't thrilled about the late fee. So, she said, let's not do the recap, I said. We were both there. Fair. She tapped her pen against the notepad like she was waiting for inspiration. I've been thinking, she started, which is how every failed group project begins. I waited. I don't think either of us wants to drag this out. That's the first thing we've agreed on in 6 months. I'm not going to make some speech, she said. I'm not good at speeches unless they come with visuals. Try me. I'm feeling brave. She didn't smile. She did that thing where her mouth twitched like it was considering the shape of a smile, then abandoned the attempt for efficiency. I don't know if I ever stopped caring, she said. But I know I stopped checking if you were still trying. Well, I was. Until I saw my competition was a man who thinks kombucha can heal generational trauma. She actually laughed. A short, surprised sound. Then she looked down, like even that reaction was too generous. I didn't mean to replace you, she said. You didn't. You just phased me out with trial versions of people who didn't ask about property taxes. You were always very practical. And you were always very experimental. Guess we just stopped balancing each other out. Another silence. Not tense. Not warm. Just the sound of two people realizing they've run out of lines in the play. I'm not asking you to stay, she said. I just didn't want it to end like a bad review. You hung me in a gallery without context. I think the critics had their say. She nodded. I'm selling the house. Oh, I don't want to live here alone. It's not haunted or anything. Just awkward. You mean like your last 3 exhibits? Another short laugh. A little sad this time. I don't hate you, she said. Good, I replied. Because if you did, I'd feel like I missed a really dramatic opportunity. I hope you still write something one day. I hope you pick better lighting for your next muse. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't have some moment where one of us said, maybe someday. We agreed to meet the lawyer next week. We decided I'd take the dining table. I liked it more than she did. And she'd keep the couch I always said was shaped like a question mark. She handed me a folder. No envelope. No art. Just logistics. We shook on it. As I left, she said, you were funny through all of this. Tragedy brings out my best material. The door didn't slam behind me. It just closed like any other door. Not dramatic. Not final. Just done. 2 months after our last conversation, I found myself in a government office waiting room, holding a folder with copies of finalized divorce papers, sitting between a man arguing with someone over speakerphone about child support and a woman with a Bluetooth earpiece who was loudly rescheduling a root canal. If purgatory had a waiting area, I was pretty sure it had the same wall color and vending machine. The clerk eventually called my name with all the ceremony of announcing the next sandwich at a deli. I walked up, signed what needed signing, nodded like I was buying a used sofa, and walked out. That was it. That was the end. A few initials, a legal stamp, and 26 years of mutual assumptions packed into a file cabinet in the back of a county building. There's this idea people float around that when you close a chapter, you walk away enlightened. Wiser. Transformed. All-knowing like you spent the last year trekking through emotional Nepal. That's nonsense. I walked out of there and immediately forgot where I parked. If that's growth, it's not winning any awards. In the weeks that followed, I made some changes. Nothing grand. I didn't grow a beard or take up kayaking or suddenly start photographing my meals. I just adjusted my expectations of what a Tuesday should feel like. For one, I didn't have to hear Sophia explain the symbolism of her new project, which involved gluing receipts to papier-mâché busts and titling them transactional affection. So yes, life improved marginally by subtraction. I kept the dining table, not because I was sentimental, but because it was the only thing in my new place that didn't wobble. The place itself was modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a neighbor who believed volume was the answer to loneliness. The walls were thin, but at least they weren't covered in passive-aggressive reminders about mood flow or energetic clutter. I painted one wall blue, not for any emotional reason. It was just on sale. One night, I found the old folder again, the one with all the gallery drafts, artist statements, and neatly labeled images. It had been sitting in a drawer under a stack of tax documents and a charger for a device I no longer owned. I took it out, flipped through a few pages, and realized something strange. I didn't care anymore. Not in a bitter, I'm above this now kind of way. I just looked at it the same way you might look at a souvenir from a trip that wasn't great but didn't destroy you. A reminder that, yes, you did go there, and no, you don't need to go back. I ended up mailing it to Sophia. No note. Just the folder, placed inside a padded envelope with her name and new address written in my most indifferent handwriting. I imagined her opening it, wondering if it was symbolic. It wasn't. I just didn't want it in my drawer anymore. Leonard came by that weekend with a pizza and a stack of board games like he was staging an intervention for my social calendar. He asked how I was doing, and I told him the truth. I was fine. Not amazing. Not liberated. Just fine. Which, if you think about it, is actually an upgrade from confused and quietly insulted. I still think you should have done something dramatic, Leonard said between bites. Like changed your name or started a podcast. My voice is too nasal for a podcast, I said. And I'm not going to rebrand myself as Gerald for the sake of narrative closure. He shrugged. You missed your chance to be mysterious. I was married to someone who collected human characteristics like she was designing a dating app. I think I've had enough mystery. The truth is, I didn't need to reinvent anything. I just needed space. Not in the philosophical sense. Literal space. Enough room to sit on a couch and not have to pretend it matched the emotional tone of the afternoon. One morning, I opened a blank document on my laptop. Not because I had a novel in me, but because for the first time in years, I didn't have to explain what I was doing with my time. No one asking if the story had a visual concept. No one suggesting I turn it into a short film scored by ambient rain and narrated by a voice actor named Stefan. I didn't write anything brilliant. I wrote a list. Just things I was tired of pretending to enjoy. At the top, 1. Interpretive art that requires a guidebook. 2. Gallery openings with cheese cubes and wine that tastes like melted ambition. 3. Emotional metaphors disguised as creative expression. 4. Pretending kombucha is a personality. It wasn't poetry, but it was honest, which, to be clear, had been missing for a while. A few weeks later, Sophia's name popped up in an email. I almost didn't open it. Curiosity won, as usual. She didn't say much. Just a few lines. Got the folder. Thanks. Gallery show opens in April. You're not invited, but you probably guessed that. Fair enough. I didn't reply. That was the last I heard from her. Months passed. The table held takeout containers and mismatched napkins. The walls stayed blue. The silence stopped being irritating and started feeling optional. I chose it most days. People think closure is a conversation. It's not. It's the day you realize you no longer need one. It's the moment you delete an event from your calendar and forget what it was for. Sophia's life probably continued exactly the way she wanted it to. With layers. With concepts. With lighting that needed adjustment every 10 minutes. Mine continued too, but with fewer folders, fewer explanations, and significantly less Charles. The final lesson? If someone turns you into a metaphor, don't argue. Just leave the art supplies behind and buy your own couch. Ideally one that doesn't come with footnotes. That's all there is. Gerald out. Subscribe to the channel